Hello, welcome to another episode of The Jew and the Gentile. My name is Pastor Samuel, one of your hosts, and this is Jesse Reckelberg, one of our amazing elders. I was just thinking about that this morning. We have awesome elders in leadership.
Yes, definitely.
Challenge each other.
Yeah, a lot of differences.
Yeah.
Kind of iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
Sure. So.
Lean into it. So super thankful for that. And today we are going to be talking about presence and how all that has to do with, it's kind of going off of the last one. We talked about boundaries, and that was off of self-love.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you want to frame this? This was kind of your idea of a podcast. Let's talk about presence. I'm curious as to how you got to that conclusion and how you see that in the world and how you see that in the church.
Okay. As far as self-love is concerned, I mean, presence, we have different ways of reaching some sort of presence. Okay. So in the world, if we start off in the world, I would just basically say that we have a intellectual assent.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people mistake that as God's presence in the church and knowing God. This is how I know God, by intellectual assent.
Yeah.
And I think, now we hear a lot of different things about meditation and mindfulness and all these different things. So that's kind of how I wanted to approach it and say, okay, what does this look like to spend time in the presence versus the world's perspective of spending time meditating, i.e., all these different things like yoga or
manifesting. That's a new popular one.
Yes, exactly. So, and that's kind of where I wanted to spin off with. So.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yes. So,
I thought about having that conversation once.
Yeah.
Soon, and then here we are.
But I think, but really, it has a lot to do with self-love, to be honest with you, because the world. I mean, we when you look at people just in general, we know that there's something there, something necessary, and so we spend time in meditation. You hear all these self-help gurus, like what's his name, Tony Robbins, or Eckhart Tolle. You know who he is?
I'm not familiar.
Which is he's all about mindfulness.
Okay.
And a lot of the things he actually talks about, it really sounds very much like being in presence.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people, they come out and their lives seem changed.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is what does that look like versus what the Christian experience is supposed to look like,
right?
Versus what religion will do it,
right? Well, everything that the world does, and especially the New Age, which I would say this is pretty connected to the New Age, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of that's what I'm trying to talk about, like the presence versus New Age's viewpoint of what that looks like.
And it always goes back, for me, it goes back to the source.
Right.
Like, what is the source of this, like, mindfulness? Because it's actually based in truth, right?
Right.
That your mind is powerful, and what you think on and the Bible says that.
Right.
Think on things above, right? And so it's the renewing of your mind, right?
Right.
Where is that verse?
Romans, is it?
It is Romans. I'm trying to figure out. 12:2. Okay. That was close.
Be transformed.
Yeah. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, a wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what it is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God.
Right.
So the Bible is very clear on what we think about, is really powerful.
Right.
But it's the renewing of your mind by what? Right? It's not just us thinking good thoughts, which it actually does have, scientifically speaking, does have power in itself, right?
Right.
But the full transformation of a human doesn't come from a human.
Right.
I mean, I would just argue, look at history. Humans haven't really transformed that much. We still have the same problems.
Same problem.
We're still sacrificing people. We're still
pretty much.
Really, we are. We're still sacrificing people. We have more slaves in the world than we ever have. We're still at war with each other.
Right.
We haven't ascended.
Still killing babies. We're still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, people can say that, oh yeah, we've evolved so much. Even all this gender stuff, all this perversion, this is nothing. None of this is new. This is the same story. So, this whole everything is within yourself idea.
Right.
Slightly true.
Okay. Yes.
Slightly true.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
There's this quote. And the only reason I know this is because I've watched 13 Hours 10 times.
I was gonna say probably 12 times. But
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All the demons, all the gods, all the worlds are within you.
Right.
This was something that this guy was reading. He was reading a philosophy book, and
Mm-hmm.
he said that, and I was like, "Huh, that's kind of true, right?
Right.
Okay, we can decide. I am going to partner with the Lord.
Right.
That's within you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a Christian, I have authority over demons.
Absolutely.
But I can choose to partner with a lie. I could choose to partner with the enemy, and therefore I'm allowing that demonic power
Right.
to have influence over me.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that all the time without even knowing it.
Exactly.
And all the world, so then all the worlds are within you, right?
Right.
What our lens is, what we decide to focus on, really makes our world.
Exactly.
So there's truth to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But see, the reason why it gets weird, and that it can go really weird if you don't know the Lord, is that it just this esoterical
Yes.
everything's good. All the gods are good.
Like I said, it's like the spiritual or the intellectual ascent.
Yes.
We've taken our minds that our minds are the center of the universe versus we're just a part of the universe.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yeah, without that partnering.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting you brought up Romans 12 because a lot of people they'll go right to Romans 2 and they'll say, don't be conformed to this world, right?
Yeah.
But I actually think one of the most important words in those two verses is bodies.
Yeah.
So I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm glad you actually brought that up because I really feel like people gloss over that and they don't realize that when we present ourselves in what spiritual worship is the presence, right?
Yeah.
So when we present our bodies as a living sacrifice, we put ourselves into his presence, then we go on and we're being transformed by the renewal of our mind.
Yes.
So, and I think that's kind of where I wanted to go with this.
Right. So actually, okay, this is really deep.
Yes.
Because this goes back centuries.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to Gnosticism and Stoicism. So
Yes.
these are
I was hoping you would bring that up.
two really big things that happened in the early church, and why Paul was so freaking savage.
Oh man, I would have loved to meet him.
Because Gnosticism, a lot of the epistles were combating Gnosticism or Judaism,
Right.
trying to infiltrate and tell people. Okay, so Gnosticism was saying that Jesus wasn't actually a person. He didn't come as a human being. The Spirit of God came on a human being, and then he ascended right before the crucifixion because God couldn't possibly die.
There was even some sects that actually kind of would say that he was kind of like a hologram.
Yeah.
That he was
Right.
looked like a body, but he wasn't really a body.
Right, because the belief is that all, and so paganism. This is actually pagan, right?
Right.
Pagan religion believes that everything physical, everything on earth, everything that we can see and touch and interact with is evil.
Right.
But when we go to Genesis, what does God do? He creates everything, and every time he created something, he says, this is good. And it's good. So this is a big distinction between the actual Christian faith and pagan belief systems, right? And unfortunately, it's actually infiltrated a lot of the church. I was shocked when I was learning about Gnosticism.
Yes.
And
I'm actually kind of studying that myself right now, too.
Yeah.
Like restudying, I should
Right.
say. Yeah.
Because, like, a lot of people really get offended with miracles and healing and all that stuff. Like, you kind of put it down. Like, your body's not that important, all that stuff. And It's like, okay, I mean, sure, but...
We're going to get a new body anyways.
Yes.
Right.
But what did Jesus do? He healed people's body, and he created, it was good. He wants us to thrive. He actually, that is good. Everything on earth, he made. It's good.
Right.
Now we're in the process of redeeming things, and things can be used as evil, for evil, I mean, but they're not inherently evil. They're inherently good.
Right.
So every time there's something that is used for evil, that's not the purpose of that, right? But Gnostics believed that you have to ascend from this physical world. And it was a really big problem because as all belief systems, then people used that belief system incorrectly and said, well, only spiritual things matter, so I can have sex with whoever I want, however I want, how many times I want, doesn't matter, right?
I can act like an animal, basically.
Right. I can do whatever in the physical world, but in the spiritual world, I'm super great, right?
Perfect.
So there's that part of that, and that is actually the whole thing, that the other source of what people are talking about. They don't know it, and they don't know how old this is. Like, this is not new.
Oh, it's not new at all.
Like, oh, I'm good, but the goal is then to ascend this physical world through this spiritual stuff, but it's all you thinking it, doing it yourself, right?
Right.
And then the other part of that is the Stoics. And so they're kind of similar in that they don't have, like, emotions are bad. Just stay neutral. And that's how you ascend. So it's all mental and intellectual ascent. And you're kind of above all of these petty feelings, all these petty, like, physical things. So they kind of partner together in our modern world with all of these super intellectual people who believe, like, in evolution. Somehow evolution's the intelligent version of the creation story. I don't understand how that is, because that too is also just a development of pagan versions of the creation story.
Right.
Like, you go all the way back to Mesopotamia, and they're like, there's this blob. There was a blob. There was always a blob, and then the gods evolved from this blob. Somehow that's the intelligent version.
Just somehow.
Somehow. I'm the unintelligent one for believing that God created
Right.
intelligent human beings in the earth.
That's so true. Yeah, the problem with like the Gnostics, and like you said, it goes back, actually goes back even before the early church, all the way back
Yeah.
to the Tower of Babel.
Yes.
I mean, it really does. It goes back to I can ascend to the heights of God
Yeah.
under my own
Mm-hmm.
bodily will, because obviously they were building a tower.
Yeah.
And also with our minds, that I can achieve these things,
Mm-hmm.
and through my own self-love,
Right.
that I create myself,
Right.
and I beat into my own submission,
Right.
and that's how I ascend to the heights of God. Or not necessarily, they say to the heights of God, but the reality is they were ascending to the heights of themselves.
Transcending God.
Right.
Basically.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the word I was looking for. I couldn't think of it. Transcending, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading this thing, actually, I'm kind of reading this book just on the Apostles' Creed, and they kind of break it down theologically.
Yeah.
Super cool. And it talks about God. He doesn't have a gender.
Right.
And that was part of what people were battling in the early church.
Which I can understand.
Right.
You know.
And so I realized actually this whole gender thing, like this whole like gender fluid, whatever, you can choose whatever gender you want. People are trying to transcend God.
Right.
They're actually trying to make themselves into God because God doesn't have a gender.
Right.
And they're like, well,
I could be they, them.
yeah, I can be whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, that's not how that works.
No.
So,
You know, and how does that translate to self-love, though?
right.
You know, that's the question. It's like when we try to transcend, what happens is eventually there's a form of asceticism, or like, you know, back in the early church, there was people that beat themselves.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
or you know, you always, there's a lot of the Hollywood movies, they'll show like the super religious guy in the corner, leather strap in his mouth,
Yeah.
whipping himself,
Yeah.
trying to cause himself to submit. But actually, what happens is there's no self-love in there at all. It's actually a self-hate
Yes.
versus a self-love.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem, is a lot of people, they don't, especially when we move it into the faith, a lot of people, they think that that's self-love, and that's where religion comes in and
Yes.
kind of partners with it.
Yeah.
They're actually, it's a self-hate or a self-loathing
Mm-hmm.
of who you are.
Right.
So
And it partners with the fact that everything here is evil,
right,
right?
exactly.
And so again, it kind of goes back to the whole money thing,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. Like, all of this stuff is just evil. I don't want any of this earthly stuff. It's like, okay, I mean, I see your intention with that statement.
Right.
You really just want the things of God. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But you miss the fact that these are the things of God.
Right. Yeah. You drive down the street and you see these coexist stickers, and the intentionality of it is great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we live with these people that have different beliefs and different thought processes, but the intentionality does not, it actually does not transcend, does not help us meet God. It actually keeps us from Him and experiencing Him.
Right.
And transforming.
Yes.
You know, so.
Yeah, and really at the end of the day, it's going to be empty.
Right.
When your source is yourself.
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to fill yourself. Like, that doesn't make sense.
No. How many of you, I would say, wake up in the morning and you're just not having a good day? How do you transcend on those days?
Right.
How do you go through the day trying to be what you say that you're going to be?
Yeah.
You can't actually get there because your source is yourself.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. This is gonna be but it works. Okay.
No, that's okay. This is an awkward subject because there's so many different things. I mean, as we were probably noticing already, it's like,
well, Bear.
whoa.
So I used to watch Bear Grylls, the survival show.
Yeah.
And he's out in the desert, and this is after he ate like a camel testicle or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And he's like out there for days, and he's like, man, there's no water. There's no water, but a human being can drink his own pee 3 or 4 times before it becomes poison.
3 or 4 times?
Yeah. But that's really what self-love is when you're the source.
Pretty much.
Eventually it becomes poison to you.
Yes, exactly.
Because you're just recycling and recycling and recycling.
Yes.
And it's not how that works.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah. We're like, it's not, you don't generate this stuff.
Right.
God is the source of love, right? God is love.
Right.
And so, I heard this, I watched this YouTube video. I don't even remember her name. And I used it in a podcast yesterday for Quorum Day. I'll check it out. But she said, God spoke to the sea to create fish. God spoke to the earth to create trees.
Oh, I just saw the same thing.
Yeah.
Where did I see this?
God spoke to himself to create humans.
Right.
He spoke to the sea because that's where fish thrive and they can live. He spoke to the earth for trees because that's where they naturally thrive and live.
Right.
He spoke to himself because that is where humans need to naturally live and thrive. And so this whole self-love, absent of the source of our natural habitat.
Right.
Our natural habitat is God.
Right.
Is to be in God. He is our source. But when we make our own, when we're trying to generate our own, like, can you imagine a tree trying to generate earth?
No.
Like, it's ludicrous, right? Like a fish trying to generate water.
Right.
It's absolutely insane. You can't do that.
Right.
And yet humans were like, you know what we can do? We can generate God.
Right.
Ourself.
It's true. I think I can't remember who I heard it from. And it was an interesting statement, not theological. This is not necessarily what I believe, but it made it kind of painted a picture that helped me kind of understand creation. And when you look at the Garden of Eden, that was actually inside of God. That whole process that was happening there was already inside of God. Now, obviously, God is outside of time. He sees the end and the beginning. So realistically, it's not like so far-fetched. But so man was thriving in the garden.
Right.
And outside of the garden, he was not thriving. And he was always trying to achieve, trying to achieve the Garden of Eden effect in our lives through various means.
Yeah.
And it's impossible.
Right.
Because what does the Bible say? There's cherubim, I think? Or is it seraphim? I can't remember which one's it with the flaming swords. You get in or whatever. So it's a valid point. Like, this is where we thrive.
Yeah.
This is where we live. This is where we live inside of him.
Right.
And the problem is we've forgotten that, especially in the church. So.
And we're trying to, this newer trend, like these crazy people on street corners manifesting something from their brain, right? I had never, I was like, what is this? It's a whole world, like a whole belief system.
I did not know
that people are like, they manifest what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's the same idea.
So Powerball ticket numbers, okay.
Basically, yeah, that's what they think, right? You manifest this, but it's like no. And then people are getting confused about like what manifestation means,
right?
When it comes to God in the Bible and Christianity, it's like, okay, when Christians talk about manifestations, it's a manifestation of God.
Right. So Christ in you, the hope of glory. The glory is his manifestation through you
right.
on this earth.
again, it's the source,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Like, me sitting here, I want a donut. I'm going to manifest a donut.
Tabitha's gonna bring me a donut. Tabitha's gonna bring me a donut.
Like, that doesn't work.
No.
Because I'm the source of that. There's no power behind that
Right.
when it's just me. Now, if I said, Lord, man, I would just really love a donut today, and I prayed, and he sent someone with a donut,
Right.
I mean, that's a manifestation of my prayer
That's a
coming
very,
true.
That's a
right?
very good manifestation.
It's a great manifestation. But it's not me as
No.
the source.
Exactly.
So, at the end of the day, the difference between presence is actually the person,
Right.
right? Because when the world's talking about presence of mind or whatever, it's you,
Right.
or actually you're found a different presence,
Right.
and it's a demonic presence.
Yeah, I can go on my phone right now and probably download 20, 25 apps of mindfulness,
Yeah,
of meditation, these things that they sound good when you actually read them.
right.
Meditate on this thought.
Yeah,
Right? And they sound great, but it really doesn't, and it never ever achieves
right.
the super goal of transcending our human sinfulness and all that other stuff.
Right. Because we don't have power for that.
Right.
Whereas Christianity, the source of presence is Him.
Right.
Right. And so the difference is vast.
Absolutely.
I can create things. I can't create all the things.
Mm-mm.
Right. Like,
Right.
I'm not all powerful. God is all powerful. We have access to that. And so, like, the idea of that these things. So here's where we can get wrong as Christians. Mindfulness is bad. Meditation is bad.
Right. Yoga is bad.
Yoga, presence is bad. Like, focusing on those things,
Mhm.
that's dangerous. Manifestation is bad. Okay. No. So they've taken things that are true,
Right.
and bent them towards what they want. They bent them to their own
Right.
selfish ambition. But those things were already true.
Right.
There's nothing, the world doesn't actually have anything that wasn't taken from God, right? He created everything.
Yeah.
We should be meditating. The Bible tells us to meditate on His Word day and night, right?
Yes.
Have it on our hearts.
Mhm.
So we should be meditating on the Word.
On the word.
We should be meditating on who Jesus is. We should be meditating on what He's done for us, right? That's actually the purpose of communion. It's like to remember what He's done for us.
Right.
Remember me as you do this. That's meditation,
Yeah.
right? So, in a way, Christians have been lazy with that stuff.
Right. And I think a lot of Christians don't realize too is that when you look at Buddhism,
Yeah.
do most people know that Buddha actually points to Christ and talks about Christ likeness in some of his writings and calls him a Buddha type. Same thing with Muslims. He talks about Christ as a prophet.
Yeah.
All the world religions will point actually to Christ,
Yeah.
but then they twist it
Yep.
and they make it into something, their own version
Yes.
of it.
Yeah.
Well, because they don't really actually want to submit to Christ
Right.
in that thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
a lot of people don't realize that.
Right. Yes.
Which is interesting if you think me. I mean, even like Hinduism and Krishna and all these other different things, these different gods, they actually will quote Christianity or
Jesus.
Jesus in biblical things and point to it and say it's like this.
Yeah. He was actually us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
They'll use him as like validity.
Right.
Right.
But instead of like this, it
is this. Yeah.
Right. There's a big difference.
Big difference. And the same thing with like, manifestations. Like, okay, manifestation. What are you manifesting? Like, no, the point when Christianity, it talks about manifesting. It's the manifestation of the Spirit.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you pray for someone, they get healed. That's a manifestation of the Spirit of God.
Right.
So don't get scared by these words because they've stolen them, and don't actually learn from their fervor for those things and be like, hey, I need to bring this back to the source. They stole this from me originally. I'm going to bring it back to the Bible, where actually every single one of those words is in there.
Right.
Every single one.
Exactly.
And so it's actually kind of it's a challenge, right, to see what's actually true, bring it back to the Word.
Be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
Mindfulness.
It is. That is.
It's the same thing, except the source is wrong. The source is right.
Yes.
That's really the simplicity.
It is this. It is. And so, we should be people. We should be spiritual people. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this the other day. But we need to be grounded in community. We need to be grounded very much so in this, in the Bible, in the Word, because if you can't explain it, if you can't be like, okay, this is where I'm getting this from, then it's really dangerous. And so you need to actually be in community where someone could be like, hey, man, you're off on this.
Right.
You're getting weird. You think you're talking to Jesus. I don't know if you are, because the fruit of this isn't great.
Right.
And so we should be very spiritual people.
Right. So a lot of the verse that comes to my mind, I think it's in Psalm 1, when it says that you will be like a tree planted by living water.
Yep.
Okay, so a tree has what? Roots.
Yeah.
And if you ever seen a tree planted by water, the roots are kind of, they're deep. They're saturated. They've got plenty of, they're typically, those trees are full of life.
Yeah.
So take that picture and just pause there for a second. And then we fast forward to the New Testament, and Jesus says about making a tree good, right?
Mm-hmm.
If a tree is good, its fruit will be good.
Yeah.
If a tree is bad, its fruit will be bad. So a lot of times, what we try to do in the church is we want to be like, I gotta do this, and do this, so that way I can do these things, so I can become, and I can transcend, and I can get in His presence after I do all these things. But the reality is as you plant yourself in His presence,
right,
and your roots go deep, all of those, your fruit will automatically become good.
Yeah.
You'll become a healthy person. You will swear less. You will do this less. You will, all these things that you were trying to do.
You will actually hunger for the Lord.
Right. You will actually, your roots will cause that fruit.
Yeah.
To become luscious and delightful, or whatever way you want to look at it. So the problem is what religion tells us.
Yeah.
Religion is, obviously another aspect that we look at in this podcast is it's really no different than the world.
No, it's not.
I can transcend on my own.
We put a Christian sticker on it.
Right.
And we say,
if I read more, if I pray more,
yes,
I can become.
Yeah.
And good luck with that.
If I save this many souls, see these many miracles, if I don't,
right.
If I don't smoke, I don't drink, it just becomes all of these don'ts and all of these do's. But we already know. So you you can't legislate morality.
No.
You can't make rules that people will follow. You can't make a tree grow a different fruit.
No.
Right?
No.
And that's a lot of problems in our society right now, is that and human beings, is that we try and legislate morality when we're not living in our natural habitat. We're not living in our natural source.
Right.
So of course we're going to go the wrong way. Of course we're going to do stupid things. We're going to do the wrong thing because we're like a tree that's not planted in the ground in good soil. We're like a tree that's not even. We're just we're dying. We're basically getting waiting to be burned up.
Right. I mean, I think it was you. Maybe it was in the last podcast, or maybe it's somewhere. I just heard it recently, and you kind of like, wow, that's crazy. So God gives us the 10 Commandments, okay? And so we have the law, and we have some basic stuff that we gotta, that the Lord's like, hey, try to do this, right? Which we know we're gonna fail. And then we have the majority of the current law, Jewish law, comes from that 400-year drought.
Yeah.
Right before Christ.
Yeah.
So the majority of that comes when there was no prophets. The Israelites did not hear from God for 400 years. And what did we do? They legislated themselves into oblivion.
Yes.
Which is hilarious to me. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
We are so dumb.
Yeah. So
so
there, I have it written in my Bible because it was like, it blew my mind.
So was it you that told me, or was it? I don't know.
I think you heard it. Maybe I had mentioned it.
Okay.
There was 252 laws in the law of Moses.
Yes.
Now, the time of Jesus shows up. By the time Jesus shows up, there's 613 Jewish laws. 613. And it came in that 400 period of silence from the Lord. Mm-hmm. These were not from God.
All right.
Man made them up. And what a great picture of what we live in today. Right? Like people trying to make all of these laws and all of this stuff that we transcend. Like, there's so much going on right now that that is the mindset. Right. Is that humans are naturally good.
Right.
On their own.
But
no.
If that's the case, why do we need this many laws?
Yeah, if that's the case, you don't need laws.
Right.
If that's the case,
everybody's going to do whatever they want, and everything's going to be good.
Yeah. And actually, that's the big difference between, all these revolutions in our history. Mm-hmm. Is, the belief that, humans are good, it's the systems that are wrong.
Right.
Right? The only revolution that didn't have that mindset was the American Revolution. All of the founders were like, man is sinful, we got problems, we need the Lord. Exactly. And they knew that going into the structure that they were creating. And I think I've mentioned it before, but I believe it was John Adams said this experiment will not work if people do not know God. Yep. We will not handle freedom if we do not know God.
We will actually put ourselves back into a prison.
Into prison, yes. And we see that so often. Mm-hmm. It's insane. And self-love, when it is that peace cycle, is putting yourself into bondage.
Right.
You're a slave to this thing because the source is never. You're gonna need more and more self-love. You're gonna need more than 14 hours a week eventually for this self-love, because now you're just recycling poison. It's not working. You're gonna need more and more and more, and it's actually you're poisoning yourself.
Right. Exactly. That's just it really. Like, I'm trying to think of where that is. I think it's in Galatians when he talks about, with all these things there is no law. Is that Galatians?
I think so.
Shoot. I'll Google it. Sorry, people.
It's close. I feel it.
I know. I'm like, what is it? Of course, the internet's not working. But anyways, so when I know it's like gentleness. It's not the fruits of the Spirit. Or is it the fruits of the Spirit? Galatians 6? But basically, when we understand and we meditate on these things that are of the Lord, and we actually walk in the freedom of no law. So a lot of people get confused with that. They actually think, well, now that I'm a Christian, I have to follow all these rules so that way I can become and transcend. And that's the trap. That is the trap. We actually end up walking back into the way the world does things.
Right. Yeah. It's the law of Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's actually the transcendent law.
Right.
It's higher.
Galatians 5.
I was close.
5 verse 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. How do we get those things? How do we understand that we already have the fruits of the Spirit, right?
Yeah.
We already have them. It's just like that tree planted. We become planted where our roots go deep.
Yeah.
We start to manifest these fruits.
Yeah. It's actually a singular fruit.
Right.
Like we don't have to grow multiple things.
Right. Exactly.
It's just this is the package of the Spirit.
Right.
You abide in Him. John 15, right?
Right.
Abide in me and I in you. I'll prune you.
Right.
Don't even worry about working on yourself. I'm going to do it.
Right.
Right? And we talked about this, I think, in the last podcast, or maybe it was just a regular conversation. But the whole I'm working on myself thing, the whole self-love thing, I'm improving myself. It's not your job. Jesus is the vine dresser. He's better at this than you.
Right.
You're going to be chopping things left and right. You're going to be chopping the wrong things, actually.
Right.
Because we're too much about our comfort. We're too much about ourself. Right. And we're going to grow the wrong things, and we're not going to actually be fruitful.
Right. And you look at these things. These are let's just measure this according to the world's view of meditation and mindfulness.
Right.
Say Buddhism, Hinduism.
Yeah.
Love. Sounds pretty normal. Sounds like the world wants love, joy, peace, forbearance, which is essentially patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Yeah.
All of those are trying to be achieved through that other thing.
Right.
They're all trying to be achieved through that way. And they're also trying to be achieved through religion.
Yeah.
So we already know that we need to be planted somewhere.
Yeah.
We know that something's missing in our lives.
Yep.
And if anybody really, I don't know about you, but like if I wanted to really understand self-love, right? Self-control, of course I would need self-control if I want to love myself.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we got into that with boundaries, is that you actually start with yourself.
Right. I need patience with myself, knowing that I'm not there.
Yeah. I'm not perfect.
And knowing that Samuel's not there, I can be patient with him. You know?
Right.
You know, this beautiful interchange that happens.
Yes. And actually that gives people, like for me, when I see someone who's really hard on other people, I have so much compassion for them because I'm like, man, your self-talk, the way you treat yourself is so bad.
Right.
It's terrible. Like you're so much harder on yourself than even you are on other people right now.
It always works that way every single time.
Yeah. So it's very true. Like we need to do that for ourselves. We need that. But the source of our self-control even is the Spirit of God.
Right.
Our source.
The fruits of the Spirit.
The fruit of the Spirit.
It's beautiful. I mean, you know, I would tell people that one of the things that we have to really kind of just camp on is like you said earlier, meditation is good.
Yeah.
Meditate on His Word. Meditate on what He says about you.
Yeah.
That's actually the best way to love yourself.
Yeah.
It's to say, you know what? He says this about me.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of Christian circles have run around this, and it almost feels like, I don't know what you guys, or how you feel about it, but it almost feels like the church in general has kind of given up on that.
Yes.
Especially the last couple of years. Like all of a sudden it's just like dead in the water. You're not hearing much about the person's value and their identity and who they are, and we forget about that.
Yeah.
But it's only found in his presence.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, it's been a crazy time, so there's been a lot of subjects to talk about.
Right, exactly.
But it is interesting that you say that, because what is the biggest war right now? Identity.
Exactly.
Identity politics, gender, all of this stuff, right?
Right.
Racism.
I'm politically left, or I'm politically
Yeah.
not right. No, you're not either.
Right.
You're a child of God.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, like, what is the source of that? And we did, like, meditating on the right things is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strange that we got here, but abiding in Him and being pruned by Him is the difference, a big difference,
Right.
For people who are walking with the Lord, as opposed to people who are like doing myself.
Right. I would suggest to people to like really, really read Psalm 119. I find it funny that Psalm 119 is in the exact dead center of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
The exact dead center.
Yeah.
It's the longest chapter of the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's the most repetitive chapter of the entire Bible. It basically repeats itself over and over and over again about meditating on his testimonies,
Yeah.
his law, his statutes, all those different things. Essentially, it's pouring yourself into his presence and understanding and really realizing what that actually does for you in you.
Yeah.
So,
It's good stuff.
yeah, definitely. So
yeah. And self-love, abiding in the Lord, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just learned this for myself. I guess I had a revelation. I probably would have said that I know the difference, but it hit differently. There's a difference between rest and relaxation. Rest should propel me to want to further the kingdom, be like fired up for Jesus, want to get into his word. That would be rest. Relaxation is just, I'm having a good time. I'm just playing a video game, hanging out.
Right.
Not necessarily wanting me to be propelled into the fight.
Right.
And so self-love, again, should propel us, should grow our capacity to love other people. Self-love should look like rest, right?
Right.
Where a lot of people's self-love is really just relaxation, if you really get down to it.
Yeah.
You just need more and more, but you're not actually doing anything through wrong coping mechanisms.
Right. Interesting. It's abiding and becoming.
Yeah.
Because as you become, you will do all those things that you want to do.
Yeah. Right.
You ever notice that, like, now there are people who argue that this isn't true, but I always love the idea is like old married couples.
Yeah.
Okay. You ever notice how like ones that have been married for like 50 years, they look like each other?
Mm-hmm.
50, 60 years, and you're like, wow, you look like brother, sister, not husband, wife.
Yeah.
Well, again, some people call this a wives' tale. I don't know if I agree. I think it's actually true that a woman's DNA will absorb and transform into the man's DNA over a period of years after intimacy, being together. So to speak. The more we're with the Lord, the more we will look like Him.
Right. Well, even so, let's say that the DNA thing isn't true. Right.
I believe it is. But
I actually agree with you. I think it's true.
Yeah, because I know too many old couples that look exactly like each other.
But let's just say, for argument's sake, it's not.
Right.
you're going to be with this person for that long. Their preferences are going to shape you.
Right.
And and vice versa. So your preference and her preference, they're going to start coming together.
Right.
To look this like your style is going to be different, your speech is going to be different,
Right.
the way you operate as a person, how you interact, it's going to start to blend together.
Your likes and your dislikes.
Yeah, it's all going to start to shape each other.
Right.
So even regardless of the DNA thing being true, that's just I think it's true, but
I do too.
that alone,
right?
So the more we're with the Lord, the more we're abiding in Him, the more we're actually bringing Him to our source, which is really the Christian version of self-love, is to go to the source, because that's the best way I could love myself, is to go to my source, because humans are not the source of love.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing we need to kind of stamp in there, is that self-love is kind of misnamed, because you can't love, we don't generate love.
Yes. Interesting.
Love is something above us.
Right.
Love is something from God.
Right.
God is love.
You can't actually love yourself without God.
Right.
It's impossible.
Right. Hence why people keep needing more and more of that time, because they're recycling their pee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, kind of like to piggyback that, but slightly off topic, when you look at marriages and stuff like that, non-Christian marriages, how healthy can they become without the presence of the Lord?
Right.
I mean, because if God is love, how do you do that without?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I honestly don't know.
Is it just like an animalistic urge, or is it if I take care of my wife, she'll take care of my needs, and then I take
transactional.
Care of, is this transactional? Exactly.
Yeah.
Is that really love? I don't know. I mean, we were married before we were Christians, so I believe that it is more transactional than it actually is.
Yeah.
Was true love.
Right.
So, and like you said, I can't love my wife without God.
I think that,
and the more I love her and take care of her, the more I actually love myself.
Yeah.
Because I realize my value.
Yeah.
It's important.
It is important. Well, I think this was a riveting episode. What do you think?
I think so too. It doesn't feel like we talked very long, but it was some interesting aspects from it. So.
Very interesting. Until next time, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I feel like there's more here. We need to dig some more into this.
I think so. This was just kind of like, let's break this glass and see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Well, let us know what you think in the comments. If you think there's something we should hit on, let us know. Like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. And if you would like to donate some money for this ministry, for New Life, there is a link in the comments as well. So feel free. Be blessed. Be generous. I'm not just saying that because the ministry needs money. It's a biblical thing. We talked about, I think, being generous.
Be generous.
It's more of a blessing for you than it is for me.
You'll be surprised.
You'll be surprised. All right. Till next time. See you guys.